This month sees the return of one of my favourite readathons, the return of the Magical Readathon. We had our spring semester in April, and now we are back at school for the autumn semester to study for our second kind of 3-tiered subjects. This is the second year I have been doing the Magical Readathon officially and with this current setup, but I have taken part in the Magical Readathon since it's a huge part of my reading year and I always have a great time with it. I actually prefer it now that it has original content that G at Book Roast has put so much work into. There's so many characters, so much story, so much lore that builds up kind of almost every time there is a live stream. Every semester there is some kind of challenge or opportunity or storyline added, and she always keeps things fresh and I just have such a brilliant time with it. Now, part of the kind of concept is that you have to design your own character. That character is going to go to school and studying for a calling. And a calling is sort of, I guess, like a career. Every calling has a different set of exams to pass that year and within 4 years achieve master status in that calling. I created my character, who is a dwarf called Ula. I came up with the story of how she was kind of joining the school late. She had come in during the Year in Aeldia challenge and had joined a batch of students as they arrived. She was going to want to become a demonologist because I felt that was quite different from what I would expect from your traditional dwarfs. Then last year I made my character take part in the lore side quest and she had a horrific near-death experience. This year G released some kind of new callings to add to the pack and I decided I wanted to shift around what Ula's going to be doing. So my in-universe story for this is that after that near-death experience, she has reassessed her choices. She spent winter with her friends at school and she's been discussing things. And then when we went into spring, I had her sit down and decide on something new. Her calling is going to be an Aeldian Excavationist. You officially only take one calling, but you can study extra subjects if you feel like it. So a lot of people kind of unofficially take secondary callings. The Aeldian Excavationist doesn't have a whole ton of books to it, so I'll be taking 2 secondary callings just to make my month harder. She's going to be doing an Aeldian Excavationist, which is basically an archaeologist, but she's going to throw in some necromancy and tome binding with those so that she can uncover Aeldia's lost species, raise them from the dead, get their stories and whack them into some books to sell on to the magical community. Those who are passionate about the ancient life of Aeldia dedicate their time to making sure those who used to walk the lands in the distant past are not forgotten in the present. Whilst a lot has been discovered and recorded, there is an abundance of research yet to be done. The excavationist's main goal is to dig up the past in order to understand and appreciate it. They often venture out on lengthy missions focusing on a particular area, carefully extracting the remains, fossils, energy leftovers, and look for other signs of old magic, flora and creatures. As we're gearing up for the readathon, I thought it might be a fun challenge to read some books that felt like they really would be part of my calling. So for this week, I have picked a selection of books that I think a necromancing archaeologist might read to prepare herself for going back to school. I've put all of these in a spinner wheel and I'm probably going to pick maybe 3 or 4 and try and get through them before the start of semester. The books that I have potentially on my pre-entry reading list are The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love by India Holton, The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. MacLean, Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas, The Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi, The Knight and the Necromancer by A.H. Lee, A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan, and Of Ants and Dinosaurs by Lu Xiaoshen. So for my first spin, we have The Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi. For the second spin, the second book is The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. MacLean. third book is The Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. The first two books were books I kind of thought of mostly as the Excavationist, and this book is one that is more clearly for the necromancy part of the calling. So I think I'm going to pick one more. 4 might be a bit overly ambitious, but if I don't get to all 4, that's fine. So I'm going to spin a wheel again. So this last spin is much more optional than the other 3. It would be nice if I can get to this one, but I'm also not going to worry about it too much if I don't. So the last spin is going to be about some dinosaurs. So that is another one that I had kind of thought of more as the Excavationist. I'll be honest, the only other Necromancer one I had was the Knight and the Necromancer. That's nice though, because the main idea of my calling is the Excavationist being the biggest part, so it totally makes sense for me to have more of those books on the reading list, and just a hint of necromancy that Cemetery Boys will bring in. So I'm going to grab my copy of Cemetery Boys, and then I am going to take a trip to the library to get my study supplies. And I will get back to you once I start on my first book. So I started the first book on my summer reading list, and I have to say it was a bit of a dud start. I picked up Of Ants and Dinosaurs by Cixin Liu, and this one just didn't work for me. It's a really interesting concept. It is a combination of a sci-fi, I guess a historical, and a kind of an allegory tale. So it's a little bit like Animal Farm in that the societies that we're seeing in this book, which are prehistoric dinosaurs and prehistoric ants, they're symbolic of different groups within human society, and the author is making his point about human society by using these two. The novel sets us up with dinosaurs and ants both as separate societies with their own languages, their own buildings, their own skills. And over the course of the first bit of the novel, they begin to interact with each other. They develop kind of codependent societies where each are able to bring their strengths and balance out the other's weaknesses. Then as it goes on, the two different societies come into conflict. And I'm not sure how it ends because I DNF'd it about the 60% mark. For me, I think the problem with this was partially the sci-fi aspect. I know I always struggle more so with sci-fi than with fantasy, but also the allegory aspect just didn't work for me. I enjoy Animal Farm, but I think Animal Farm has kind of a stronger sense of character than this. It's not so much that I struggled to connect with the characters as much as I really didn't see characters there. There obviously were characters, there were people, there were dinosaurs or ants that were individuals, but I didn't feel that you got any sense of the personalities that they had, certainly not enough to care about them as people. I think the problem with this I had was just that it was far too macro storytelling, and I struggled to connect with it. I think if you enjoy non-fiction, this might be one for you because it does read very like non-fiction. And it's definitely an original, kind of a unique premise told in an interesting and unusual way, but it was just one that didn't connect for me personally. So hopefully that's not a bad sign. So since Ants and Dinosaurs didn't go brilliantly, I am really hoping for better luck in my next book. And the one that I picked was The Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi. This will be the 4th Scalzi book that I've read, and I always really want to like his books. And I enjoy them while I read them, but by the time I get to the end, I usually am sitting at around about a 3.5. The concept of this one really appeals to me. It probably is the one that's appealed the most to me, if I'm being honest. And so I do have very high hopes for it, but I also have that kind of weight of knowing that I've not loved the author in the past. This one is carrying the weight of potentially being my last John Scalzi book if I don't really enjoy this one.
then I think I'm maybe going to have to accept that he's just not an author for me. I am currently just about to start chapter 9, which I think puts me roughly a quarter of the way through the book, and we have done all of the setup. We first meet our main character Jamie during COVID times, during lockdown. He's working as a food delivery driver for a kind of Uber Eats type of company run by dickheads who are taking advantage. Unfortunately, he can't quit the job because he's the only one of his roommates that is actually pulling in a salary. He's supporting all of them, all their rent, all their food. He's the only one able to work. And then he finds out that the company he works for is getting bought over by Uber, and Uber don't want to keep all of the staff. Luckily, and sort of by happenstance, one of his deliveries is someone that he was acquaintances with in college. Not exactly a friend, but a friend of a friend. And when he shares his story, his woes, this guy hands him a card and says, "We're actually desperately in need of someone who can start right away. If you're interested in a job, it's basically a bit of heavy lifting. Hit us up." So Jamie is told he'll be working for a animal rights company, a large animal rights company, and he gets onboarded very quickly by KPS. There's a lot of things in the interview, in the induction period, that seem a little off to him, but he needs the money. His roommates need him to keep paying their rent, and the benefits are really top tier. With his new KPS team, he gets sent to an isolated spot in Greenland where there just so happens to be a nuclear reactor. And there they travel to an alternate Earth where kaiju are a thing. It's a little bit like Jurassic World. And that's where I am right now. Jamie and his team of scientists are finding their way in this new world. They are figuring out how they are going to survive with all these creatures that aren't exactly animals. So far, I am really enjoying it. It's really pacey, it's really quick and really funny, and it definitely feels like the best of the Scalzi books I've read so far. So I don't want to jinx myself and say that this is going to win me over, but it's certainly up there. And the Jurassic Park idea just seems like something I'm really going to enjoy. It's the type of sci-fi I'm most likely to enjoy in movies. This would be an absolutely perfect fit for my Aeldian Excavationist because we are preserving creatures that, although they're not dinosaurs, so they're not extinct, they are creatures that really don't exist in our world, and that seems definitely like something my character would be reading up on before she goes back to Orillum Academy. I am pleased to report in and say that I have reached the end of the Kaiju Preservation Society, and I had a much better time with this than I did with my last read for this vlog. I also think I've probably found my favourite John Scalzi book. This is, as I said, a little bit like a Jurassic World AU. Our scientists go through to this alternate Earth where kaiju are kind of the dominant power on the planet. They're big animals or big ecosystems entirely on their own. And then the bulk of the story is mostly then just our protagonist Jamie settling in, getting to know the rest of his team, finding his kind of place in the expedition, and dealing with the different kind of problems that pop up. We have a pregnant kaiju, we have a nuclear detonation that weakens that link between our world and their world. And it was just a lot of fun. Scalzi does a really good job of balancing the things I have liked or disliked about his previous books. Instead of having that kind of macro storytelling that we had in When the Moon Hits Your Eye, this one focuses right in on Jamie. We do get to see the rest of the team. We get to see little snippets of what they're up to, but it's all told through Jamie's eyes, and personally I found that worked a lot better for me. I still don't think I would consider it a 5-star read, but it was definitely somewhere in the 4s. It's solidified my idea that I would pick up more Scalzi in the future, but I would always wait and see how the particular premise appealed to me, rather than him being an author that I would just pick up anything from. When I finished up with the kaijus, I decided to take a break from the magical animal type of books and focus in on that necromancy spin. Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. I'm currently sitting round about the halfway mark. This is about a 16-year-old trans boy. His family has powers that involve the dead, but those powers are very much split down gender lines. And this is very much Yadriel trying to prove that he deserves to be one of the men Rather than staying at home and working healing spells, he should be out defending the graveyards, summoning souls, guiding spirits back to the afterlife. Because he has been denied these rituals by his family, he decides to do it on his own. And while he's trying to summon the ghost of his recently deceased cousin, he accidentally summons the ghost of high school bad boy. And they decide to work together to find out what happened to Julian. I'm having a really good time. The real standout for this is the world building, the magic, the family, the Latin culture that is coming. It would have been perfect to have read in October, but either way, I'm really enjoying those kind of spooky, magical vibes that are coming through. And there's loads of food, there's loads of little references to different cultural traditions, there's lots of use of Spanish throughout, and I'm really enjoying that. I think it's really immersive. I will say that despite really anticipating this one, it's been on my shelf for a long time. I don't think I'm enjoying it as much as I enjoyed Aiden Thomas's next book, which was the Sunbather Trials. I've read his first book, which was a Peter Pan retelling, and I thought was alright, but I didn't love. And then I read the Sunbather Trials, and I gave that a 5-star. I still need to read the second part of the Sunbather duology, but this was his second novel. And as I said, I'm not enjoying it as much as Sunbather Trials, but I do think it is better than Into the Neverwoods. So to be honest, that still bodes quite well for my relationship with Aiden Thomas as an author, because I'm reading his books slightly out of order, but if I were reading them in order, then each book he releases, I'm enjoying more and more. So that definitely bodes well for me reading Celestial Monsters, which I really need to get to before the end of the year. So I finished up with Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas, and I really did enjoy this one. I'm sticking with my kind of halfway point thought though, that as much as I enjoyed this one, I don't think it lived up to the Sunbearer Trials for me. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because that just means that Thomas's writing is getting better with each installment, and I think that's what every author's looking for. So I definitely am writing them off with this at all. I thought this one worked perfectly as a standalone, but on finishing it and going to Goodreads to mark up my progress, I found out that this is actually going to have a sequel coming out next year. While I wouldn't have been looking for a sequel, I am interested in reading it. From the sounds of it, the sequel is going to focus more on Julian and some new powers that he has developed, and I think that could be really fun and interesting. The reason that I'm going to be totally okay picking up a sequel is that in this, the world building and the characters were the real draw for me. The plot was interesting, but it was Julian and Yadriel and Maritza that were the key driving force for my interest. I loved them as characters. I loved the way they interacted. There was a nice amount of banter, but it wasn't overwhelming. And I thought they came across really well and believably as 15, 16-year-old kids having this adventure. I did feel that the pacing dropped a little bit just before we went into that final third act, the big finale. And maybe it could have just been a little bit tighter there, would have just, I think, elevated this from a 3.5 to a 4. I'm going to give you a little bit of a spoiler here, so if you're not interested, just skip ahead. I'll keep holding the book up until I'm done. I was a little concerned round about that 75% mark that we weren't going to get a happy ending. I was suddenly kind of hit with the realization that what if this is like they both die in the end? The concept has been fairly steady throughout. We come into this book knowing that Julian is going to die. We read the book from the start. Julian is a ghost. We've been told he was murdered. How are we going to get a happy ending for these two characters? And I did start to doubt myself. I thought maybe the happy ending we get is that Julian goes off, his spirit is released, and Yadriel finds the strength in himself. But my little romance lover heart really wouldn't have been happy with that. And I'm really glad that Aiden Thomas manages to find a jail free card that I don't think felt forced. I didn't see the twist coming, but once it was revealed, it felt completely logical. It felt like all the steps had been there, and it was just me that hadn't seen it. So I'm really happy with that. And if you are a little bit concerned that this being pitched as a romance, that it might not have a happy ending, it does. So that's a good thing to know, especially because it's a YA novel. I think if it was an adult book, I could have saw them having a tragically doomed romance and actually found myself loving that concept. But with a YA, the idea that Julian was already dead, and because he isn't part of this magical community, he won't be coming back to visit, it would have really broke my heart if we had ended on that note. Overall, this maybe wasn't everything I dreamed it would be. I had been hoping for a little more, but I do think that's because it's a slightly older book. The author has improved since then, and I still really am invested in the sequel. I definitely think this one is absolutely worth a read, and especially if you wanted to try and hit exactly on Halloween, the Day of the Dead, when this is set, it could be some perfect immersion reading. The last book in this vlog is The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. MacLean. And let me tell you, this was such a breath of fresh air. I had had a couple of false starts with some books. I had had a couple of mediocre to disappointing reads that weren't part of this vlog. And I was starting to feel a little bit reading slumpy, or just not really wanting to pick up anything that I currently had in progress. And then I decided I was going to start this one. As you can see, it's a little bit shiny because it's from the library, so I knew I had to get it back. It is due back in a couple of days. And so I thought I might as well force myself through it, at least try it. And I am so glad I did, because this for me, I think, is going to be the standout of this vlog. I'm currently about 50% in, and I'm just having such a fantastic time with it. Let me just show you the map that this book comes with. This is the map of the zoo that the story is set in, and I have never been so immediately sold on a place. I'm not one of those people that is massively bothered by maps in my fantasy books. I tend not to reference them unless I really, really have to. But I don't know, something about this one, just it hit every kind of nostalgia button in me. I think because it looks vaguely like kind of the leaflets you get when you visit a zoo or when you visit a Disney park or any other kind of theme park. I just was instantly hit with the desire to go here. And reading the book itself has not changed that fact. I love the way MacLean has created all these different magical animals. There are things we recognise. Obviously, there are dragons, there are phoenixes, there are griffins, but within each of those species we know there are also subspecies. Since we are specifically following a phoenix keeper, we're getting to see all the different breeds of phoenixes. We're getting to see lots of other magical birds that the author has created for the book. And we also kind of, through happenstance, we get to meet kelpies, we get to meet griffins, we get to meet some different breeds of dragons. And all of the creatures just feel really incredibly grounded. I could absolutely believe that this is somewhere I could go. And I desperately, desperately want to, because it seems like not only would I want to visit a zoo that had these magical creatures, I would also specifically want to visit this zoo, because this zoo sounds incredible. There have been moments reading it where I've been tempted to look up pictures of the animals we're talking about before I remember that they're not actual animals. It has that same vibe I got when I was reading The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and kept wanting to check Evelyn's Wikipedia page. I'm also really enjoying our protagonist, Isla. We have two potential love interests going on. Honor, the Dragon Keeper, is very kind of first crush. She thinks he's very handsome. She becomes all flustered when she speaks to him. He's very charming. It's very smooth. But the relationship that I'm fairly certain is the romance, and does seem like the more complex relationship, is between Isla and Luciana. Luciana is the Griffin Keeper. They went to college together, and they haven't got along right from the start. Luciana is much more extroverted. She is very good at publicity. She's very good at PR. And so naturally, the two of them get teamed up to work on this new Phoenix project. I really struggled at first to like Luciana. We're only getting to see her through Isla's eyes, and she is definitely not a fan. Luciana does come across as aloof, as snotty, as someone who is mocking others. She doesn't come across as a nice person. But as we have crept towards the middle of the book, we're starting to see that maybe she does have a softer side. Maybe her really brash personality is covering for some insecurities, the same way that Isla uses her intellect. And I think we're going to see more of that as the story progresses. While I'm only halfway through, I am fairly certain this is going to be a 5-star read for me. But I will let you know once I'm finished. I finished The Phoenix Keeper. I loved it. I really don't have a lot to say. I find it hard when I really, really enjoy a book to tell you much about it because it's just me screaming internally. But this was amazing. The camera is not doing great with the library cover, but you know what? I'll just stick a photo. I'll just stick a picture here. So The Phoenix Keeper is the perfect cozy fantasy romance for me. I do know that cozy fantasy doesn't work for everyone, or different levels of it don't work for everyone, but this one worked really well for me. I was so immersed in this world. I was ready to pack my bags and take a trip to the zoo. I I don't know that I would want a direct sequel to the book. I don't know that that's I don't know that I was left wanting to know exactly what happens next. I think it's a perfect standalone. However, I would definitely be up for maybe books set in the same universe, like in the same zoo even. I would love to have a book series where the next book would maybe focus on a different keeper with a different set of animals with different challenges, and we could do an entire standalone but connected through the zoo universe. Or I would love an art book for this universe with illustrations of all the different magical animals. Or hear me out. Or we could do a game. We could do like Animal Crossing, but in the zoo. I would absolutely be up for a play as a zookeeper in this zoo type of game. Or a TV series, an animated TV series with each episode focusing on a different enclosure. There are so many options that you could spin off this book into, and I desperately hope that at some point S.A. MacLean goes back to this world and does something fresh with it because I had so much fun. The plot is very slow. You know that. It's a cozy fantasy. There's not a lot of stakes. There's not a lot happening for the majority of the book. We are just with Isla. We are with her struggle to come out of her shell with the people she has a crush on. We are watching her struggle with the challenges of being in a fairly intensive job when you are perhaps more introverted. She loves being a zookeeper, but there are all those other aspects that come with that job that she's not as much a fan of, but she has to do if she wants to succeed in her own goals of first being given the male phoenix for the breeding program, and then in promoting the breeding program to keep the funding going for it. She has to learn how to talk to the press, how to talk to the director of the international organizations. She has to step up. I love the friendship between Isla and Tanya, who is one of the other Phoenix Keepers. They were really ride or die friendship, and I loved watching them interact. Their two romances played off each other really nicely. That conclusion is really action packed. There is a lot crammed into those last couple of chapters, but I think it worked really well. It let the bulk of the book remain quite cozy, quite slow, quite meandering, but all the kind of hints and steps you needed were definitely there so that the conclusion felt inevitable, and it just added that little rush to the end where sometimes I feel like cozy fantasy can sometimes feel like it misses that finale moment. So yeah, I am finishing my summer reading with The Phoenix Keeper, and it was a absolute 5-star read. I'm really excited to be going back to Orillum with the Magical Readathon next month and reading all these books about animals, a little bit of necromancy, has really, I think, got me really excited to go back and do my Aeldian Explorer, Demonologist, Story Weaver, career mashup character that I'm wanting to play as. Let me know if you have enjoyed this video. If you're doing Magical Readathon, let me know who your character is and what subject they're doing. Do you have a potential reading list that would really fit your character's calling? Let me know that as well. If you're not doing Magical Readathon and you've just really enjoyed seeing me read all these magical creature type of books, then tell me what your favourite was in the comments as well. I'd really love to hear it. If you have another book that you think would fit the kind of general vibes of the calling that I'm doing, those kind of magical animals, the necromancy, anything along those lines, let me know those as well, because I think this might be fun to do again next year. I've had a great time with this vlog, and I hope you have too. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.